Church. And if you would, everyone, please silence your phones. And if you so choose, please stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Eternal God, our Father, we take this time to bow our heads, submit our hearts and minds unto you as being the creator and sustainer of all life. We acknowledge your sovereignty, your omnipotence, but most of all, your benevolence toward us, that we can not only just be your creation, but be your children. God, in your word, you instruct us to not trust in ourselves, but in all our ways acknowledge you, that you would direct our path. And so, God, as we gather together, these city officials and those who are going to make up today's meeting, that you would lead and guide us into paths that would be pleasing to you and for the betterment of our city and our people. God, we thank you so much that you've done for our lives. You've been faithful to us in our past and our present, and we're even bold enough to thank you for what lies ahead in our future. So, God, we love you because you first loved us. We submit this and so many other things that we could ask in the name of him who once was dead, buried, resurrected, and soon to return to rule, reign, and reside, Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. May I have roll call, please?
Mayor West.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Turner absent. Councilmember Durio.
Present.
Councilmember Getz.
Present.
Councilmember Felshaw. Present. Councilmember Samuel. Here. And Councilmember Neal.
Present.
Thank you.
Okay, today we have one proclamation and two presentations. First, we have a proclamation for the Scout Old Timers Association of Southeast Texas, who are celebrating 100 years.
Whereas for the last 100 years, the Scout Old Timers Association of Southeast Texas has upheld and promoted the high ideals of the Scout Oath and law. And whereas the Scout Old Timers has encouraged our youth to embrace and enjoy the outdoors and all that is scouting, the Scout Old Timers have preserved the traditions and have met consistently to relish the memories of all that is scouting. Scouting is the most successful organization in the world for boys that now includes girls. For 100 years and counting, the Scout Old Timers has celebrated and preserved the intangible virtue of Scout spirit. Now, therefore, Roy West, Mayor of the City of Beaumont, do hereby proclaim and designate January 27th, 2024 as the 100th meeting day of the Scout Old Timers of Southeast Texas. The City of Beaumont congratulates and wishes you many more years of scouting and continuing your fine accomplishments and achievements. Accordingly, the Mayor has hereunto set his hand and caused the seal of the City of Beaumont to be affixed, signed this day, January 23rd, 2024.
If y'all would like to come up, Mr. Beatty, President of the Scout Old Timers Association, and anybody that is with you today.
There was a young timer right there. Thank you. Yes, yes. Appreciate you, boss.
All righty, y'all, look right here. And 1, 2, and 3. Excellent, excellent. Yes.
Next, we have a communications update from Lauren, our Beaumont Communication City Director. And I didn't want to say I get it wrong every time.
Just communications update is great. Good afternoon. We're excited to be back with the announcements for the week of January 23rd. Starting in February, council will meet every first and third Tuesday of the month at 1:30. There will be a 5:30 night meeting the months that have 5 weeks. All dates and times are available on the calendar on our website and all will be held in council chambers unless otherwise posted. The next meeting will be Tuesday, February 6th. The 2024 Community Development Block Grant applications closed January 31st at 5 p.m. These grants are federally funded by HUD to support low and moderate income households in our community. Applications can be found at beaumonttexas.gov/CDBG. Save the date and join us for the first public meeting of the proposed downtown hotel and convention center project on February 13th from 6 to 9 p.m. at the Event Center. You'll hear from the consultants, share your ideas, and make your thoughts heard. If you can't make it or want to give your input in advance, you can always submit ideas of what you want to see at beaumontvision2035.com. The Terrell Historical Library's popular Genealogy Days is back. Stop by the library the first Friday of every month from 10 to 2 for help researching your family history and answering any questions about Southeast Texas. The library is also participating in Black Men Read, a program that changes lives and learning by exposing kids to powerful stories and powerful role models by elevating Black men as storytellers and community leaders. Tune in every Friday in February to the library's Facebook page for a new book and reader. And save the date for Mardi Gras, which is coming up quickly at February 8th through 12th. Now celebrating its 33rd year, Mardi Gras Southeast Texas is family-friendly, and there are many ways to get involved, from joining or watching a parade to catching live entertainment or the carnival. Did you know the event is actually a fundraiser? Proceeds support 14 area nonprofits, and more information is available at mardigrastx.com. You should also save the date for Mural Fest, which is happening March 1st through 3rd. 10 new artists are being brought in to create new art all over town, with more information coming soon. And we hope you tune in to our next podcast episode about Black History Month, which is dropping February 1st. You can listen to it on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you stream your podcasts. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, we have a presentation from Steve Ahlenhius, President of the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce.
Mayor, thank you. Council members, thank you very much. Really appreciate this opportunity. Kenneth told me I had 9 minutes, so I'm going to try to cover this in 9 minutes. First of all, I want to recognize Brad Irving with Jay's Landscaping. He did a fantastic job of working with us and coming up with the conceptual designs and ideas that you're going to see. And so just a big shout out to him. He's a big supporter of Beaumont and wants to see the community be successful. I want to thank him for it. So on the first slide, if you have really what is a food park and what does a food park do for a community? Number one, it helps create that culinary diversity, which you like to see. It gives a chance for startups that maybe have never thought about starting a restaurant, but it's too expensive, and a food truck concept gives them a low entry into the market to be able to do things. Second, it's an economic boost. People love going and experiencing different foods with different settings. And so it's a way to drive economic activity and tourism for our community. Third, it's a gathering place. If you've ever seen a successful food truck park, it becomes an area where families want to go down. People want to take visitors down there. It's a gathering place. You can do live music. You can have events going on. And it just becomes a place, what a lot of experts call the third place, where people want to gather and be a part of. Next page. Small business development. Obviously, that's part of our charge with the Chamber, is growing the economy, helping small businesses be successful, and creating that opportunity, that marketplace that allows for somebody to have a low-cost entry into the marketplace and have them an opportunity for success. So when you do a food truck park, it almost becomes like a food court at a mall, where you have several different vendors offering different foods and different fares. And then finally, it's a great way to revitalize unused space. And a lot of times you'll see communities do this in their downtown area as a way to generate redevelopment in the community. It's a cost-effective way to do it. My experience in terms of launching this, we had folks that would go to Austin and come back from the community I came from and said, why can't we do a food truck park? And the answer was, why not? And so just changing a couple of the codes that allowed for the trucks to be created and making it easy for them to do business really just, allowed us to launch into something really new. So we started out with 12 food trucks in our food truck parks. And when I left 2.5 years ago, there was over 158 food trucks in the community. So it is a way to drive economic activity. Next slide. So this is, and again, this is a generative dialogue. I know there may be some challenges with this location. I know there may be another location that may be located close to the Civic Center right over here that might work. But I'm always reminded people love to be close to the water, right? And so, I always love that SNL quote, I'm a motivational speaker down by the river. We'll have a food truck down by the river. Next slide. So this is the drawing of how it would be. What we're proposing doesn't take up a lot of space. Gives you an idea. So you have the food truck park with 8 food trucks, and then you have boat slips. If you notice at the top there, boat slips. This was an idea that Council Member Getz talked about in terms of wanting, with the river so close, it's a great opportunity to do something to attract boats on the river to stop and grab something to eat. You could do a beer hut close to that. That's something that I've never done before, but I think as you look at different food trucks parks, that's something that's a good driver for a food truck park. Next slide. So this is the color version of it, right? And so you can see a lot of landscaping. Obviously, when you ask a landscaper to help develop it, they want to make sure there's plenty of green space, and I think that's a critical component to this. It's an industrial area, and so I think the more we can put in green space, I think the better off it's going to be in terms of attracting folks. So you can tell one of the key things is that you want to use your existing parking lot, and that's one of the challenges that you have with a food truck park. You want to find something where you have parking that's readily available. I call it the Walmart effect. People want to be able to park their cars and walk right up. Next slide. This is just another version of it. You can see, of course, that's the hill with the going toward the bridge. You see the river down there. Next slide. I think this is a great picture in the evening, right? So developing the boat slips and the walkway to the river, and then also lighting that up. If you notice, there are a lot of sunshades, right? So what we would propose is a artificial turf in that area that would allow for kids to play, to have cornhole tournaments, to have music, those type of things. But shade is a critical component to this. And then also having bathroom facilities is important in terms of for the customers and for the food truck vendors. Next slide. Again, here's just some different pictures of it. Gives you some ideas of what it could look like. Again, wanting to emphasize the shade and the green space. Next. And then you can see the restrooms and the concepts there. Next. And then the last one. And that gives you the idea of the boat slips. And I recognize working with the Corps of Engineering, that can be a challenge. But what we're proposing isn't a dock per se, but a boat slip that could be done fairly easily, depending on working with the Corps of Engineers. And last slide. There you go. So with that, I'd be happy to try to answer questions. The emphasis behind this presentation is just a generative dialogue. I think it's a great opportunity for our community. I think it's exciting. I think it can be done cost effectively depending on how and where we locate it. But I would be happy to try to answer questions for you. But I just wanted to use this as a way to start some dialogue and conversations around the concept of developing a food truck park.
Councilman Getz?
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Do we have the five through on there? The kind of the fly-through? Okay, I'm sorry, Mike.
Well, Steve, I want to compliment you on this, these renderings. They are really dynamic and offer something that could be very exciting to go along with the Riverfront Park redevelopment. We're looking at putting a proposed hotel that will be unveiled February the 13th. All of this together would create a synergistic effect and drive people downtown, which is something we're trying to do. One of the things with food trucks, as our ordinances are written right now, and this might be like a city manager question, food trucks as they exist right now have to leave their site daily and go to a commissary and dump their gray water. And if this food truck park comes into existence, would that change? Would we be trying to keep them there for a longer period of time? Would we build something where they could dump their water there without having to move? How would all that work?
Okay, I can't speak for Mr. Coleman. He's not here, Health Department, but I can just give you a little bit of conjecture on my part. With a food truck park, a lot of times you put those amenities on site. You'll put grease traps, you put things to hold gray water, et cetera, on site, build it into the infrastructure of that project. And then, of course, pump it into our sewer system in that case. That way you won't have to haul it for sure on that type thing. So for its commissary, either you could stay with the existing ordinance or you could build something too as a commissary on site that could hold for cold, for cooling or freezing or holding meat, et cetera, in preparation of food and things like that. So it depends on how grand of a project you want to make it. You could do some of those things on site, or you could continue to have them comply with their ordinance as it exists.
Well, I know that there's some very successful food truck parks in Austin, and I think maybe in Buda, where you came from, they might have had one too. I would encourage us to look at best practices and see what they do to make theirs successful. I don't know that we need to reinvent the wheel. If we've got a model somewhere that is successful, I think that we should do it. In terms of expense, I shared with you a potential grant application, and I understand that we're going to explore that.
Yes, we'll look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Durio, then Councilman Turner.
Yes, Steve, maybe manager, I have one question. The actual food trucks that come, does the city charge them to come set up there?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did was almost like an RV park, you set up the electrical posts for each one that's metered and then charge them. We were charging $800 a month for that. And that cost included the grease trap and access for water. The electricity was paid separately. They took that. And then the lease agreements were on 30 days. So as long as they gave 30-day notice, they were able to, if they wanted to come in and try it. What we found over time, some of them were very successful. Some of them got into it and realized, man, this is a lot harder than I thought. I was only making $400 net profit at the end of the month and decided I don't need to be doing this. And they ended up selling their food truck. So there's lots of different ways to do it. We did a prefab bathroom. There's a company out of Houston that did it, and so we were able to offer the bathroom right there on the facilities. But parking and ease, and to Councilman Getz's comments, the food truck, I will tell you, my experience has been the food trucks don't want to move every night. They're going to want to park it there, stay there, and then what we've found that the health department just made regular inspections, just like any other restaurant, that make sure that they were in compliance with health code.
Thank you, Steve.
Councilman Turner?
I just want to compliment staff and the chamber coming together, working on economic development, specifically downtown. We've been talking about this food truck for a while, and just to see it come to fruition from the pictures to the dirt to where we're trying to go is pretty impressive. One thing I want to talk about, I know we had a budget and a timeline that we said we want to get this accomplished within. Bart, can one of y'all refresh my mind on what was the budget we had budgeted for the food truck part?
My recollection was it was approximately 650,000, and I believe it's in the CIP, but I believe it's identified as a bond vote issue, future finance.
Okay, and can it, when we talk about the possible bond vote issues, to people who don't understand how those bond votes work, can you kind of explain?
Well, council will identify whatever projects they like to see, and then you would have a vote or pass an ordinance to put it on the ballot. And with it being on the ballot, the citizens or voters of Beaumont would vote on the issue on a pass-fail type of agenda for sure. So basically, it's just something that would be approved by the voters if it's on the ballot. Or, a council also has the ability to issue the debt yourself. But right now, we have it identified as a thing to go on the ballot. And the CIP, it's in the CIP, it's not budgeted yet. So the dollars will have to be identified.
Well, one thing I want to basically kind of double down on, I think it's good that we know a budget of what we like to spend. And I think something that's key that you said, the community will decide if this direction we want to go on, just not the council. We're setting a vision, but we want the community buy-in prior to spending any of those dollars or attempting to go into dollars already saved. So I wanted to kind of point that out, your mindset with the budget, the whole staff, the direction we're going in to get the community buy-in. I definitely support that.
And I think it's in the 2025 year, a part of the CIP, and it was a part of the strategic plan too, as identified by this council as a high priority. It's a high priority.
All right, Councilman Philshaw.
Steve, again, well done. Appreciate you doing this. You mentioned earlier that you've seen this done once before, started small and grew large. What price range was that project in? And I know it's not apples to oranges, I understand, but just looking at a project like this, what kind of number would it take to address this?
Well, again, location, right? So obviously down by the river has some challenges as far as with sewer and electricity and those issues. Up by the conventions, the Civic Center, I think would be a little bit less cost expensive. And then you get into, so what we were able to do, and this was 2014, we were able to do it for $300,000, but that was, different time. Yeah. Cost of materials are a lot different. But we used an existing parking lot. We didn't do the heavy landscaping, which I think is really critical. You always look back in hindsight, you'd say, okay, if I could do this again, what would I do differently? And I think making it more welcoming and the shade is a real critical factor to that. And so heavily landscaped and the sunshades, I think, is critical. And then just the flexibility of rotating, different types of food trucks in and out of that location.
Well, and I love the idea, I do. And again, appreciate what you brought to us today. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Ahlenhius, thank you. I just want to applaud you and the chamber for bringing this forward, certainly working with the city manager and the staff, because we've been talking about economic development. And as everybody has said, we've got to be looking forward to determine how we're going to do that. And food trucks have continued to get more popular across the country. So it's certainly something that we need to consider. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the presentation. Now, those that are here for the proclamation and the presentations, if you would like to leave, now's the time to do so. And I want to thank you for coming. All right. And now we are going to have the time for citizens who wish to speak. You may make public comments on the consent agenda, agenda items 1 through 8, or any other topic. The city clerk will call your name when it's time for you to speak. When you approach the podium, please say your address, your city, and your state. You will have 3 minutes for public comments. The green light will come on when you approach the podium, and the red light will come on when your time is up.
James Callett, I'm sorry.
And I just want to remind folks that we aren't able to respond or make comments to what you're addressing unless it is on our agenda. So thank you.
Thanks,
James Callis, Beaumont, Texas, 5375 Rosemary, the North End, lifelong resident of Beaumont. First, want to thank the mayor, Ms. Broussard, Ms. Alexander, and everyone that made the proclamation for the Scout Old Timers today. It is extremely appreciated by the group and myself. We thank you for it. I was going to recite a little bit of my Scout experience. I said I've been in Beaumont all my life. We joined Troop 17. The young man in the suit over there, John Parigi, we joined Troop 17. And somehow we got the idea that I was going to do the Citizenship and the Community Merit Badge right over there at the old City Hall. My merit badge counselor was Willie Byer. I do not know how we came up with that, but he actually brought me to the council chamber. Mayor Coconos was the mayor. It was very impressionable on a 13-year-old, and I did get the Citizenship and the Community Merit Badge. Then Johnny said, hey, let's call Clyde Rush and let's get the Safety Merit Badge. And we did that, and we went to the police station on that one. That was much tougher, but we did get that done. We spent our time in scouting. We did something every month. Our scoutmasters, our leaders, our parents made it worthwhile. We spent a lot of time doing that. We moved on to Post 30, which was the First Methodist Church downtown. It used to have a basement. That's where we met. We did all kinds of things. We went canoeing, everything. I actually went to Philmont in Cimarron, New Mexico, summer of '65. I recommend it to everybody to go to the mountains. It's most enjoyable. And then later on in 1970, these two men here with Mr. Manvel, advisor of Post 12 at Calder Baptist Church. I was advisor of Post 180 at West End Baptist Church. No, Forest Park Methodist Church. And we took a trip that I wish everybody could have gone on. We went to the boundary canoe waters of Canada. It was a wonderful trip going up there. We were in a wilderness area that commercial flights are not allowed to fly over. We spent 10 days. Once you go in, you're portaging, carrying everything either on your back or in the canoes. And it was probably our biggest trip we've ever taken. I still recommend scouting to our youth, and it has been worthwhile to me, and I thank all the leaders that made it possible.
Thank you, sir.
I'm David Pete.
David Pete, 6355 Shin Lane, Beaumont, Texas. I'm standing here, and I just listened to the gentleman just spoke about the project, the truck, food truck project. There have been other projects been presented to the council over time, and the council has spoken about another project was the homeless project that they were considering doing homeless camp. They talked about the budget on that of $240,000 somewhere in there. But since then, you never heard anything else about that. And here we are now, we're talking about a food truck project here in the city of Beaumont or adjacent to it. We have other issues in this city, far more concerning and need attention right now, at this moment, right now. And I think that it is important that the council start putting on the agenda issues that are most concerning to the citizens and not projects that are being considered or maybe, in the future. But we need something now. And that means, so you need to start considering joining together in your prospective districts on town hall meetings and things of that nature. Individually, you have the choice of doing it in your prospective districts, as the attorney has spoken to me about. So you need to join together to get something going so the citizens can come and voice their concerns and have all of the same staff, department heads, Mr. Boone, Mr. Williams, and others there to give the citizens the answers that they need. Not something cherry-picked, not something considered to be this or that, but real answers and real solutions to real problems. okay? Because the city is hemorrhaging right now. And we don't have anything for the young kids. There is no community centers for the kids. You have to go way over to Sterling Pruitt just to go to an in-house community where you should have a community. You should have a center there for all kids in all districts. Okay, so let's start talking about that. Let's start budgeting on that and getting something for the kids, for the citizens, for the elderly, you know, for the homeless, and those major issues that are concerning in the city. And please, you know what I mean? It's a good idea, okay? I've seen it, it's a good idea, but it's not for now, okay? It's not for now. What we need now is this council to put their heads together, come up with some solutions to the problems in this city. Streets, drainage, issues, housing, other issues. If you have grants out there, people are homeless. They don't have places to stay. It's been cold the last 3 or 4 days, okay? So we need to make sure we are addressing the right issues at the right time for the right purposes. And let's stop all this other stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pete.
Charlie Crabb, going to speak on item 5 on the agenda and public comments.
Real quick on the number 5 on the agenda, the generator out at the fire station. I don't want to inject too much engineering into it, but I know the generator that's can be installed for $12,000 will run a pretty good residence with three outside air conditioners and what have you. I don't know what that fire station out on Major takes to run their facility, but it just seems a little much to spend $81,000. Okay, let's see. Scouting, love scouting. I had a great experience in scouting. It's good to see those gentlemen here that experienced the scouting, and especially James Callis, who went through all those special activities. He had the memories. Councilman Getz, it's a real pleasure to hear that you've designated your wife, Allison Getz, it's with the trust fund out at Lamar University. Really neat. A lot of people will benefit from that, and I know she loved the people of Jefferson County. The bus warming station where the bus traveled around during those awful cold nights and gave people an opportunity to get out of the cold. That was a great idea to really have that thing operating all night. Now the food truck thing, that's people are really interested in that for the activities down on the riverfront. Yeah, it would be good to move it on down, but we got to get rid of that railroad track. All right, activities of the area. Of course, the gentleman spoke about activities, building for every area. Now that's super. Of course, he did mention we've got to address these other facilities of the city, the streets and the sewer and the water and the homelessness. It's let's see, does that I cover everything? Anyway, it's a great day in Beaumont. I didn't know anything about the 12-inch water line, Mr. Neal. I hope you look into that and keep that, get Calder open. Mr. Felshaw may help you with that one. Anyway, it's a wonderful day in Beaumont. My name is Charlie Crabb. Thanks for Mayor West for being here, and thank all the councilmen and Mr. Williams, Mr. Barkaskawatsky, and Boone and Ellis.
Thank you.
Leonard Thomas. Sir, if you'll speak, Mr. Thomas, if you'll speak in the mic, please, and address the council.
Addressing the community
You have to address the council.
Give my comments.
Your time has started.
City manager, you like the scum in between my toes. I don't like your tie. I don't like your little dogs. I don't like the little one button you got on your suit. I don't like your glasses. I don't like the little shine that's on your head.
Mr. Thomas, is it Mr. Thomas, correct?
Yes, sir.
Let's don't have assaults on people being up here in terms of talking to them like that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I had a firearm by a BISD cop almost pulled on me this morning, walking on the sidewalk. As a United States veteran, I'm not going to stand for it. Mr. Williams and you and actions like that are in the way of Mr. Durio, Mr. Getz, Mr. West, Mr. Turner, Mr. Samuel. Can't pronounce that. Mr. Randy, Mr. Neal, definitely Ms. Reed. Because whatever we want to do here, we can change it. It's not that hard. Even the Greater Commerce plan is not that hard. You pick up wastewater and you bring it off. That's a job. Somebody come do that. That's how you get anything off a facility. Because we don't want nobody dumping stuff out in nature's right there, right? Because that's what they're going to do to cut costs. Dump it in the, no, just come pick it up in a waste truck. We start a job, we can do that. A lot of people really come up here with a bunch of what the council needs to do, you know. But I think it's not what your city can do for you, but what can you do for your city. And being a stand firmer of, I love my city. Of pure just being dedicated to it. It's different. It's not about money. It's not about nothing. They think Mr. Samuel sit up here for a check. No, he does it because he's probably from here. Mr. Getz' wife, you know, you think he's worried about a hotel and stuff like that. You know, they do it because they love the city. Pretty sure they got some type of love for it. So my 3 minutes is almost up, but just know you guys have a problem. You guys have a problem, and I'm going to remove it so this council can be free to build this city up greater, because it's not that hard. And if it is that hard, we'll just change the weather. RJ, working on my backhand on the tennis court.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mayor.
All right, is there a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
There is a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Neal.
Thank you. On B, the 100-foot ladder truck that we're going to be repairing, what's the life expectancy of this truck?
Council manager, city attorney. That's a 1997 ladder truck. It is our reserve ladder truck. It actually underwent inspection 2 years ago. It did not pass inspection, and we were asked to put off repairs for a year budgetary constraints, and now the city has allocated the money to repair that ladder truck, and we will have a reserve ladder truck now.
And you'll be able to get several more years out of it?
We will. If you recall, probably a month or so ago, you approved a new ladder truck.
Yes, sir.
The current ladder truck that we will be repairing will go to auction in approximately 3 to 4 years once that ladder truck arrives. And we'll take one of the older ladder trucks and put it in reserve as one of our reserve ladder trucks. And by ISO Insurance Service Organization, we do have to have one reserve ladder truck.
Thank you.
Councilman Felshaw.
Chief, there's been some comments made recently about taking the ladder truck in the south end out of service. This is not that truck.
No. This
Okay.
actually is our designated reserve ladder truck. This truck started as a frontline piece of equipment. It lived its life as a frontline, went to reserve, but all our ladder trucks are tested annually. It did not pass inspection.
because of safety reasons. One section of the fly experienced failure, which means we either send it to auction or have it repaired. And the repair was the best option because we do require one reserve ladder truck. And it is currently stationed at Station 9 in the West End. It's housed at that location right now, but it's completely out of service right now.
The ladder truck that was taken out of service can be put back in at a moment's notice, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay,
That would be truck 11.
thank you.
All right, Councilman Turner, then Councilman Durio.
My question was for item number D.
Do we have any more for,
So I let Chris, I yield for Chris and I'll go after him. If that's okay.
that'd be
with you.
great.
All right.
Thank you, Councilman Turner. I appreciate it. I just, for the public, could you explain to them, when you say reserve, that means that that truck will only come into service if a frontline piece of equipment has to go out of service?
That is correct. Unfortunately, we do have circumstance because it's a piece of mechanical equipment that we do. It's down for preventative maintenance, or if it's wrecked or something like that, we have a reserve ladder truck. Everything in the fire service requires a backup to a backup to backup. So this truck will only be pressed into service if one of our current ladder trucks is not available or is down for preventative maintenance or other mechanical reasons.
So when it failed inspection, it went out of service until y'all could get it fixed?
That is correct. Because of the safety aspect, it has to pass inspection yearly by NFPA standards.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Councilman Turner?
I'm not gonna ask you nothing, Chief. I'm good.
I studied, so I'll be okay.
So my question was for item number D. Maybe Mr. Boone, you can help me with this one. I noticed the grant agreement with Legacy CDC. Can you kind of explain a little bit about this project? I know we talked about a few of these a while back, and I see it's back up there. So can you kind of explain about the project, some details?
Sure. So this is actually COVID money. So it dates back to that. And as part of this, basically the city was allocated roughly $1.5 million. The idea was to try to address either those that are homeless or those that are at risk of becoming homeless. And so you may recall several months ago, we had a public participation plan and we had a pretty thorough public process to take public input, notify our nonprofit partners. And so council recently allocated $200,000 for tenant-based rental assistance to, again, help folks with utility payments, rent payments, if they're at risk of becoming homeless. And then this is obviously the lion's share of those funding, which would be used for what's called non-congregate shelter housing. So again, folks who need shelter at risk of becoming homeless, this is a partnership with Legacy to purchase a complex there on Concord Road and convert 23 of those units to this designated purpose. And so, again, it's been a process that's been going on for really a year and a half now. So this is kind of the culmination of that. And so back in October, council approved the basically to move forward with this. This is just the contract for them to move forward with the project itself.
Yeah, thank you. I knew we talked about it. I just wanted to make sure we were at the final steps. That's why I was asking.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you.
Councilman Durio?
Yeah, Mr. Boone, two questions. What exactly do you mean when you say non-congregate shelter?
So traditionally, when you think about a homeless shelter, quote unquote, you might think of an open space with maybe common beds, maybe multiple beds in a single room. And so part of the red tape, let's just call it restrictions from HUD that was attached to this grant, this particular grant, is they wanted non-congregate shelter. So basically what that means is each living space needs to have its own bathroom, its own living space. So almost like a motel room or an individual apartment, whereas they did not want the open floor plan of a traditional shelter.
It's like you for families.
Correct. I mean, it could be for individuals,
Okay.
But again, it has to be a single dwelling unit.
Okay. And what are the qualifying populations?
The qualifying populations, again, at risk of being homeless, there's a whole set of at-risk populations, so single family, low income, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all spelled out in the regulations.
Thank you.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Boone, so the city's cost of this is still going to be capped at the 1.5, not the 3.8 though, right?
Correct. We're passing through the grant funds to Legacy, but no, we were not responsible for the balance.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 1?
Thank you, Mayor. Council consider resolution authorizing the acceptance of a 7.5 foot wide exclusive water line easement, and it comes with approval of the resolution.
Is there a motion?
Recommendation of approval. Sorry.
Is there a motion for item number 1?
Move to approve.
There is a motion and a second for approval of item number 1. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving item number 1, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 2?
Council consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to award a contract to V&S Construction Company of Manvel, Texas for the rehabilitation of a 12-inch water line along Gladys Avenue from Dowlen Road to West Lucas Drive project. And it comes with a recommendation of approval.
Is there a motion for item number 2?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for approval for item number 2. Are there any discussion? Councilman Turner.
Mr. Bort, I noticed this bid is a lot lower than the other bids. Do you see any concern when you look at the difference in what they bid compared to around the same amount what everybody else bid it?
We followed up with the vendor. They've been doing work for the city of Houston, and all their references have checked out. So we see no reason to exclude them.
Okay, you know, change orders I always pay attention to. I remember this number, so thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of approving item number 2, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 3, please?
Yes, Mayor. Council consider a resolution authorizing the city manager to award a contract to Tanksco, Inc. of Fort Worth, Texas for the prison ground storage tank rehabilitation project. And this comes with their recommendation of approval.
Is there a motion for item number 3, please?
Move to approve. Second.
It's been moved and seconded for approval for item number 3. Is there any discussion? Yes, Councilman Durio.
Yeah, Bart, I was wondering, kind of like the one before it is, why was our engineer's estimate so much lower than the local bid?
Tanksco is in the area already doing some work, I believe, in Port Arthur. So we're assuming that's part of the reason why it's a lower cost, because they're already here and they're not having to mobilize to our area from Fort Worth.
Well, I was looking at our engineer's estimate. It's
Right. It assumed
little bit more.
mobilization and
Okay.
et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other discussion, all in favor of approving item number 3, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 4, please?
Council consider a resolution approving the purchase of network equipment from CDWG of Vernon Hills, Illinois, for use in multiple departments. And this item comes with the recommendation of approval.
Is there a motion for item number 4?
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded for approval of item number 4. Any discussion? Yes, Councilman Durio.
I noticed that they said that this was an upgrade for, I guess, networking downtown from 1 gig to 10. And I was wondering, I'll wait till you get up here. But I was wondering, will there maybe be a need in the future to upgrade again? And if so, will it cost a lot more to do it then, or is this gonna be sufficient for our needs, this
This should
upgrade
be
here?
sufficient for quite a long time. We've been on one gig for probably 20 years. 10 should sufficiently get us where we need to be.
Okay, that's all I have there.
Thank you. All in favor of approving item number 4, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 5, please?
Council consider a resolution approving the proposal submitted by Preferred Facilities Group, USA, to replace the standby generator at Fire Station Number 6, located at 1880 South Major Drive. And it comes with the recommendation of approval.
Is there a motion for item number 5?
Move to approve.
Second.
There is a motion and a second for approval of item number 5. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Neal?
Thank you. Mr. Williams, do we normally buy these via buy board, or do we normally go out for bid on these?
I can't answer that question. There's purchasing, there's Keith, there he is. Keith Folsom will address that question.
Yes, we do occasionally go out for bid on some of that, but on this one here, I did choose to go through the buy board method because I could get it done quicker versus the bid process.
And you feel that it's a fair value for the city?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Folsom before he steps back? Thank you, Mr. Folsom.
Thank you.
There's no other discussion. All in favor of approving item number 5, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 6?
Council consider authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with GP Realty and Management, Inc. for economic development incentives under the Neighborhood Empowerment Zone program for the development of a mixed-use building, including retail and apartments at 670 and 72 and 690 Orleans Street. And it comes with the recommendation of approval.
Is there a motion for item number 6?
So move to approve.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded for approval of item number 6. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving item number 6, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 7?
Council consider authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with GP Realty and Management, Inc. for economic development incentives under the Neighborhood Empowerment Zone program for the development of an apartment complex at 704 Nature Street, and it comes with the recommendation of approval.
Is there a motion for item number 7?
So moved to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for approval for item number 7. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving item number 7, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, may we have the reading of item number 8, please?
Council consider a request to extend the deadline to allow a multiple family development and hotel at 670 through 690 Orleans as approved in October of 2020. And it comes with the recommendation of approval with 2 conditions. Construction plans must meet all requirements by water utilities for water and sanitary sewer services, including any requirements of the city's pre-treatment and our FOG program, as well as all applicable building and fire codes. And 2, submit a revised site plan that complies with minimum parking standards per ordinance.
Is there a motion for item number 8?
Move to approve with the conditions.
Second.
There's a motion and a second for approval of item number 8. Is there any discussion? Councilman Durio.
Can anybody tell me why the long delay?
So initially, it was approved back really in the height of COVID. And again, the developer seems, dedicated to the project. And so without them having to go back through the full process, we wanted to go ahead and make this the ability for them to have some additional time. But they're just essentially still working on the project.
Okay, and how long of an extension are they gonna get?
1 year is proposed.
All right, thank you.
All in favor of approving item number 8, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried. Mr. City Manager, would you please lead us into the first work session item?
Council to review and discuss a request from 2 developers for support of affordable housing projects between Calder Avenue and Phelan Boulevard and at 415 South 11th Street. And this to discuss and receive feedback on converting, I'm sorry, that's the first item. And you need me to read the item itself? Not yet.
Mr. Boone?
Yes, sir. Mayor and council, today's work session, again, is to review and discuss proposals for housing tax credit applications. And we do this time just about every year. And for the benefit of the council as well as the public, just some background on what this program is about and what we're asking council to consider here today. As y'all are aware, the Housing Tax Credit Project, the program is a state of Texas program, and it's based out of a HUD-based program. And so HUD allocates funding to states to distribute for private development of apartments, essentially, for basically safe and decent and affordable housing. And so as part of that process, because Beaumont has the number of subsidized units that we do have, part of the state rules are that the city of Beaumont must essentially allow an application, 1, 2, or 3, or some combination or none, to move forward in the process. As we talked about in prior years, there are different scoring criteria in terms of what the state of Texas Department of Housing Community Affairs is looking for. But again, that's what we're here to discuss is the 3 applications or requests that we've gotten for this year's rounds of housing tax credit application. So you see there before you, just again, council consideration. We've got plenty of time. We're looking at a March 1st deadline that the state would need to have some feedback from the city of Beaumont. And then again, the state does the scoring and the evaluation, and they usually decide in the summer as to which project is allocated. It is my understanding, and we do have the applicants here, they may know better. It's my understanding that in our region, these are the only 3 projects that I'm aware of, and so I would suspect that at least one of these projects, if council allows them to move forward and they meet all the criteria, I would expect that one of the 3 would be awarded. But next slide, please. And again, as we talked about in prior years, because we have so many units in Beaumont, we do have to give that blessing. You can also give additional support to an individual projects or multiple projects, offering additional support. And then you'll see in here we talk about funding support. What that means is essentially if council wants to, we can waive a permit fee, which gives them quote unquote financial support. Again, giving them more points at the scoring level with TDHCA. Next slide, please. Just some history, again, going back, a dozen years. These are some of the housing tax credit projects that this council has blessed in one way or the other and has gone through the process. So you see Place of Grace, Azure Point up on Chin Lane, just a variety of projects. Next slide, please. And those are the projects mapped. You can see across the city in the green dots. Next slide, please. More recently, as you may recall, in the wake of Tropical Storm Harvey, there was additional funding provided, and so these are some of those projects that basically have come online or are coming online as a result of the Harvey funding. So if you start to add it up, it's over 700 units that have come online in the last couple of years. Next slide, please. And this is that same map, but with the Harvey projects mapped out. So going on to again, 3 requests this year. I'll go ahead and start with the first in no particular order. Providence West Beaumont. This is ITEX, local. They're out of Houston, but they're Port Arthur and Beaumont. They've done several projects here. But this is proposed to be an 80-unit senior project. And if you're familiar with games people play, they're on College. There's an apartment complex that they did recently just to the south, and then you see outlined in red the property in question. Next. And this is just a rendering of what the complex may look like. It's kind of a typical. So the next project would be Beaumont Crossing. This is Trinity Housing out of Austin. And this would be proposed to be 69 units of family housing. This is located between Calder and Phelan, just west of Calder Woods. Next slide, please. So you can see here, bottom left, probably the best picture. You can see Calder Woods is there to the right side of that image, and outlined in red is the location of this proposed project. Next. And I believe this developer did the Beaumont Trails there off of 11th Street, if I'm not mistaken. And so that's an example of some of their projects they've done in the past. Next. And then the final request is for Prado Place. And this is KCG Developers. They're out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I don't know if they're here. They were on their way, and I think I got word that their flight may have been canceled. So I don't know if they're here, but they certainly tried to be here. And this is located at 11th Street. If you're familiar with the old, I think it was a Kinzel car dealership and then a church at one time. It's right there on 11th Street, just south of Hollywood. And that's the location of Prado Place. And again, this is just a typical rendering of what the elevation might look like. And so again, the guidance we're asking for today is with the idea that March 1st deadline, I believe, is looming in their horizon. We just need some feedback on which, if any, projects the council would like to support. And with that, any questions of me or the developers? We also have them here.
Councilman Neal.
Mr. Boone, how do we compare in apartments to like-sized cities?
In terms of
Numbers.
Go ahead, next slide. I will say in general, when we've looked in the past, we're comparable. I will say that, in my tenure here with the city, I think it's fair to say we have, while we have added quite a few complexes over the years, we've also lost a lot of rental housing. So I think that's one of the things we're seeing, just the city itself, apart from the private, we've probably torn down several thousand homes. And so, and I say that to say that I think what's happening is in terms of demand for apartments, you're losing a lot of rental houses. And so folks are looking for a nicer place that they can live at a more affordable rate. So to answer your question, when we've looked at how does Beaumont compare, we have a little bit more than average. As I mentioned earlier, how does Beaumont compare to other cities in terms of subsidized? We have a higher rate, as mentioned, twice the state average.
So if we're already twice the state average, why would we continue to build more?
Well, I think you have to look, every city is different, but I think you have to look at a couple things is the makeup of the city, the demographics of the city, income of the city. The slide I've got here is as of December 2023. If you look at the bar graph there on the right, you'll see the blue is the occupancy rate. And so whenever it's over 90%, that's when I think it's an indication that there's a demand for more units, especially more affordable units. So as you look, going back, really a year ago, when we were discussing this, the occupancy rate was down below 88%. And now we've gone back up over 90, even with several hundred of those Harvey units are now online that weren't online over the last couple of years. So I guess my point is this graph indicates that there is a demand.
Any other questions for Mr. Yes, Councilman Felshaw?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I guess for me, when you look at something like this, I'm always going to ask the question, what's the downside? Is there a downside to this? If we're higher than the state average, I mean, why would we not want to do this?
So in my mind, the counter argument might be traffic. Okay, so depending on the location you're looking at, you're generating a lot more traffic in a certain area. So that's always an argument. Maybe a particular area has less traffic, more traffic. But again, in terms of citywide, there appears to be a demand, especially affordable. And so, the downside, I can't think of one.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Durio, then Councilman Getz.
So, Mr. Boone, if this is approved to go forward, or one or two or all of them, after that, they still have to go before planning and zoning and then come to us or not?
No, in this particular case, all three are zoned appropriately, so there's no rezoning or specific use permit allowed because all these have been selected in zones that are as of right for apartments. So again, it's got to go to the state, and the state has to make the final decision, but it would not go to P&Z.
So also, one of the neighborhood that I'm concerned about is at 415 South 11th. That's real close to an old neighborhood called Silver City. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of single family homes there. It used to be this apartment complex over there called Hollywood Village. Mm-hmm. What I'm concerned about is putting an apartment right next door to those old homes. There's a lot of older folks live there also. Also, why is there anything that we can do when these developers come to us and we try to use this program to put people in something that they can own other than just renting? And get the developers to build something like that, even if it's like a condo or a duplex or something like that, but something that they can actually own.
The city could say, look, in order for us to consider your application in future years, we want you to provide a certain number of, maybe duplexes or something that would be rent to own. Now, again, as we've seen year after year, they tend to be these mid-rise complexes. That's a mix of market rates sometimes and assisted rates. I've not seen that, but I think the city could do that. We do use our other programs, although the funding is much more limited, like the home program. So like we do work with groups like Legacy, who is a CHODO, to try to do what we call a lease to purchase. So they may buy a home let somebody lease it with the idea that eventually they may buy it. But, to answer your question, the city could do that as a criteria to get, maybe the basic approval, or you could get, higher approval. In other words, the city would have its own process where we may give more points in order to get what we want.
I would think that's something that I would like for us to look into. Because we, of course, like I said, there's a need for apartments, but a lot of folks can pay a house note, because I think they said they're paying 100% of their rent. They can afford to pay that. They can pay for a house note, and it's something that they can own themselves one day. And I think that would be a great idea and something we need to really look into, because we get a lot of these every year.
Okay, yeah, we can certainly look into it, and we could try to get the feedback. I mean, the developers may balk at that, but at least we'll get that feedback, and we'll definitely share it with council.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Getz?
Chris, I want to express my concern about this project that Trinity Housing is proposing, trying to shoehorn a 69-unit family project in between Phelan and Calder. That's a very densely populated area already. There's multiple townhouse projects there. There's, as you can see, Calder Woods immediately to the east of this proposed site. Has the city looked at the implications of what kind of traffic impact this might cause?
So we don't typically do a traffic impact study. In fact, we've done very, very few of them. But to your point, a typical apartment dwelling unit generates, I think, 5.5 trips per day. And so when you concentrate that into maybe a smaller area, as mentioned earlier, one of the considerations and perhaps critiques can be traffic. So to answer your question, no, we haven't done an analysis. It's not going to go through P&Z. But
Well, Phelan and Calder are already both very, very busy streets.
Yes, sir.
And compared to the other two locations, busier than the other two locations. I just can't support that. It's too much traffic being brought into that neighborhood. And I have a feeling that if I talk to my constituents that live over there, they're going to share the same concern.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Felshaw?
Could you just call that map up on the screen again? Just for that one, let us see that one location as you continue to talk.
Let's keep going. One more, right there.
And that is,
The one between Calder and Phelan.
Yeah,
next to Calderwood.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Councilman Turner?
Mr. Boone, can you kind of speak to the financials to what we're talking about when we're looking at how much sales tax may be generated possibly per door versus some of the single-family homes we're talking about? Like, do you have some type of rough comparison we can kind of speak to?
So, it's hard to know exactly, but if you look at, let's say, sales tax, as I look at this map, this particular project's near restaurants and retail. Obviously, you're concentrating a lot more people in a closer area. So, and I don't want to use this one, necessarily, but if you put an apartment complex next to restaurants and retail, you would think that would generate business. On the property tax side, per dwelling unit in terms of what value that's added to the city, I did a quick rough estimate, and it ranges maybe $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 per dwelling unit. Compared to a house, single-family house, obviously it depends on what kind of house we're talking about. So if it's an older house, let's say it's a much older house, it might be comparable or less. If it's a newer house on a bigger lot, obviously it might be more. The one issue, though, is then you have to look at value per acre. And if you're talking about an apartment complex, now you're talking about 3 or 4 times the density of a regular single-family neighborhood. So you're getting a lot more value per acre for the city, and then again, more people for retail, shopping, et cetera. Conversely, more traffic, as was brought up earlier.
So it can somewhat offset each other, possibly.
Good.
Okay, my next question was, Some citizens have asked me this out of concern prior to us having this conversation on today. They said our population isn't growing, but we're growing with apartments. Can you kind of speak to it? Is it the mindset of the people who live here? Or is it just it's more affordable? I just want to know your assessment because our population has been a little stagnant, but we are increasing in apartments. So can you kind of speak to that?
I think, yes, I mean, our latest numbers is our population is still fairly flat. I think what's happening, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, is maybe some of our older housing stock is going offline just because maybe, storm damage, a landlord doesn't want to add more money into a structure. So I think you're losing a lot of maybe rental housing in some areas. And so maybe some of that's shifting to apartments. And so the good news is with these projects is you are getting newer units, right? And so, so you have a variety. And again, the more options you have for folks, whether they're moving from across town or whether they're moving into town, if you have more options, then, because you wouldn't want folks moving into town saying, man, the interest rates are high, I can't afford a new house. And the apartment complex, the selection I've got is limited. So now I'm going to go look at another community outside of Beaumont. Yeah. So having more options is always good.
And lastly, Mayor, I actually do support what Councilman Durio said, and I want to take it a step further. I like to see if we're going to allow apartments in our community, just maybe specific amenities. I noticed when Kenneth, our city manager, first got here, he stated his council got firm with, apartments and hotels where they held it to a standard where if you're going to build this, it'll be maybe a dog park or maybe a little park that would be responsible. And I would like to see us look into that direction. I heard Councilman Durio, and I just want to ditto him and let him know I support that as well. I think we do need to set a standard of what we want and how we want it in our community. So I do support that as well.
Okay. And to your point, we are looking at the parks fund. We are looking at that right now.
Yes, sir.
Well,
so kind of next steps, again, if you can give us some feedback now, that would be great. If not, the plan is to try to bring it back to council within the next, few weeks so that, and again, if you can feel free to share your thoughts with the manager in the meantime. But the plan is if you do want to move forward with 1, 2, 3, or none, just let us know, but we would bring it back. If you want to move forward with any of them, we'll bring them back in about 3 weeks.
Councilman Getz.
If we were to move forward with any of them, the one that I would support would be the one that's behind 5 Under. There's already an apartment complex there. The project, that's the only senior project out of these 3.
Yes, sir.
I think that there is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there is probably a greater need for senior projects than family projects. Is that correct?
I think we've had several come online, so I can't say exactly. The developers, they probably have better granular data than we have, but I do think there is a demand for senior. Yes, sir.
Okay. So with that being said, if we were to approve any of these, I think that would probably be the one that I could support.
Yes, Councilman Durio.
Mr. Boone, is there any way, before this comes back, like during planning and zoning, sometimes they send letters out to the neighbors to get a feel for how the neighborhood feels about a certain project. Is that something that we could do here with the 415 South 11th project?
We certainly could. We would just need to think about how to get the feedback back.
I know that you guys send out letters for planning and zoning.
Correct.
And I'm talking about the area, I guess it will be east of 11th to 4th Street, like going down Hollywood, that neighborhood there that they call Silver City.
Okay. Yeah,
Councilman,
whatever
you would
the,
need to do that for all the properties, for all the projects that are being proposed. It would need to be consistent across the board to receive feedback on all projects that are being proposed, keeping in mind that not all the projects are located near neighborhoods, so then you would have businesses as well as weighing in on that as well. And then you would have to do that for all future projects as well. You'd be setting a different precedent.
Okay. Well, I guess folks can come up for their comments and speak on it before we vote on it.
yes, sir.
Just to speak on it and let us know how they feel about it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Councilman Felshaw?
And again, Chris, you're needing direction from us on if we support any of these, how many we support, and then what type of financial support we want to give to it, correct?
Yeah, and the way I would think of it is, do you want to support any of them? Do you want to support any extra? And we've done it different ways, different years, where we've kind of let everybody go or nobody go, or the ones we really liked, we've added more. So I guess that's the way I would think of it is do you want any of them? And if so, do you really want one or two in particular?
And why don't you qualify more how we would help a particular project that we like?
So baseline, in order for them to go to the state, you've got to acknowledge that 2 times the state average of affordable housing. So the baseline is saying, yes, you can apply. Beyond that, if you said, yeah, but we really like this project, we're going to give the $500 fee waiver to this one. We're going to say we're going to endorse that one. And then all of a sudden they get more points.
So outside of that, there's nothing else $500?
Well, the $500 translates to points, which could translate
Yeah, I get
to a
that,
win.
but I mean, but beyond that, there's not much we do. Okay.
Councilman Getz?
I guess people are online watching us. I'm already getting citizens' comments. This says, as a citizen, I'm adamantly opposed to the Trinity project. So just letting you know.
And Mr. Boone, one thing I just want to add, as being in the mortgage business, I certainly want more people buying houses and having more inventory. But I know as going across the city, there are areas of the city that are older and they have less restaurants. They have less grocery stores. So clearly, I think we have to be mindful of the fact that people are going to be moving out of certain areas. If there's not inventory for them to move into, they may be moving out of the area, which would be a concern for me. I don't want our population to decline any more than it is, but also it just it presents an opportunity. I'm all for what Councilman Durio said about houses. I just realized that per door on a house is a lot more expensive than an apartment, and especially when you get government funding. And I don't know how that funding could be applied, but I do recognize that we have several apartment complexes in town that have seemed to be close to the end of their life, and yet people are in them. And not certainly the best situation for some of the children. And I think it's just something that we need to address or be mindful of how we're going to continue to address, because otherwise we could just be losing people, especially if we're at over 90% capacity at this point.
Yes, sir. And I think that's the whole reason behind the program, is to provide more safe, decent, affordable housing, because to provide that option.
Just curious, it keeps coming back to me, the Beaumont crossing between Calder and Phelan. Do you know yet? We don't know yet. We're just assuming there's going to be an entrance off of Phelan and an entrance off of Calder. I'm assuming that's.
Yeah, I don't think they're at the stage yet where they even have a site plan.
Yeah, okay. I thought I'd ask. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boone. No other discussion on that. Then we're going to move into the second work session, and I believe that our Madam City Attorney will be leading that.
Sir, thank you. Previously, this item was tabled, the item of converting a municipal court of record to the municipal court to a court of record, and council had some specific items that they wanted to address, and so that this matter is now being returned to council to address those issues and then get some feedback and discussion from council. Next slide. So originally, this item was brought to council in its first work session in May of 2023. Council asked for additional or alternative options to existing ordinances. The concept of a municipal court of record was introduced at that time. After council established its strategic plan, this item was added as an agenda item in October of 2023 to align with something that, council said that they wanted to see immediate action for that. Next slide. And then after that discussion, again, the item was tabled. Between October and December of last year, we met with VIS Digital, which provides software for courtroom audio and video recordings. Staff also met internally in December and January of this year to discuss what would be the best proposed recommendations to council post our meetings with VIS Digital. And then we're holding our second workshop on this item. So we're going to address what the associated costs would be with the conversion, the impact on our current municipal court operation, and then some alternative options that we'd like to present to council. So just as a refresher, a municipal court of record is essentially a court whose proceedings are recorded. We're proposing that they be audio recorded in order to meet the state requirement. The local government code does allow for a governing body to create a municipal court of record as long as that the necessity is required for more efficient operation of our cases. So will it work for the city of Beaumont? That really depends on council. So initially, the discussion of converting a municipal court of record started with an expressed desire from council to improve the appearance of downtown, to attract new businesses and inspire development. This is goal 3, objective 5 of council's adopted strategic plan. The prior concerns were that the fines that were implemented in municipal court were not initiating the type of change that council wanted to see, and that the process for getting cases processed through district court was too slow. So again, the concept of municipal court was presented to council to address those concerns and really focus on those initial concerns and not the overall impact of municipal court, but just solely to address those concerns. With the idea that the cases filed in municipal court will be processed quicker, that we can expedient the need to see more effective change through a civil process in municipal court faster than we would see in a district court. The conversion of the municipal court of record would require some updates to our courtroom and require some overall adjustments to be made. Next slide. So if the initial response is to just address the overall concerns for municipal court and not to, I'm sorry, can you go back to the other one? And not to really focus on that, then the municipal court of record would work for us. However, if we are gonna look at the totality of the situation, which is one of the things that council asks us to do, we need to look at some budgetary concerns, some staffing concerns, and then overall municipal court functions and operations. So when we met with DS Digital, and this is for audio recording only, to outfit both courtrooms, it would cost around $25,000, approximately $24,926.72 for each courtroom. And that was just the initiating installation cost. The annual maintenance costs would range anywhere between $5,000 and $8,000. We would also need to train a court employee to handle the civil docket. Currently, there are clerks that have their own functions, so we would need someone to manage that civil docket as well. And then we would also need to educate the public. Currently, municipal court does Class C misdemeanors, it's fine only, and most of the individuals that appear in court appear pro se or without an attorney. When they appeal a case, the process for that would also change. In fairness, very little individuals appeal their case to district court, but it does happen. And when they do so, the process now is for them to just post a bond and they move on to district court de novo, which means without a record. Under this new procedure, they would need to still post the bond, but also request a transcript, which would be provided to them on a flash drive. They would then need to pay to have that transcript transcribed into a transcript. The average cost of that is about $1.50 per minute, with some flat rates being $90, of a minimum charge of $90. And so those will be some additional charges for that. Most but not all those cases are CDLs. Most but not all of those individuals are represented by attorneys, but it could vary. There are individuals who just want to appeal their conviction of a traffic ticket. Judge Lively is here, and he might have some additional comments to add on municipal court operations. Judge Lively.
I have a question for Ms. Reed.
Yes, Councilman Getz.
Would this, if this was changed to a court of record, would it consider cases other than Class C?
So yes, sir. We would hear all essentially civil cases. We'd be able to file our nuisance cases and our other ordinance cases that would be civil. So we wouldn't change the municipal court, like we couldn't hear, like Judge Lovely couldn't hear felonies at that point. But we would be able to file our ordinance nuisance cases, where right now we have to take those to district court. We would be able to hear those cases in municipal court.
And we go straight to district court and bypass county court at law?
Well, we file our cases, like for our health cases and all those cases, we file those in district court. Like they can end up in Judge Sanderson's court, typically Judge Wortham's court. Judge Sanderson and Judge Wortham tend to get the bulk of our cases when we file those for health reasons. But like those sanitation cases, all of those cases could now be filed in municipal court as opposed to having to file them at that level.
Is there a reason we bypass county court at law number one, which hears those types of cases or has the ability to as well?
Not necessarily. Typically, when we file them, it's assigned. We've just never really been assigned to any of those cases. Like I said, we typically end up in Judge Wortham or Judge Sanderson's court.
Yeah, it was my experience when I was practicing, the docket seems to move a little faster at county court at law than it does in the district courts, and that's why I asked.
In terms of savings, and then Councilman Felshaw, what brought this up is we are looking at doing more possibly code enforcement in downtown regarding the buildings, and which, if we did that, would the cost be more if we were having to do it through county court or district court?
The filing fees and those sorts are nominal. So the money aspect is pretty much the same in terms of filing that way. Like it's the same resources. There is an impact monetarily on if for increased enforcement, but that would be regardless of what the municipal court status would be. So increased enforcement is going to cost more. So there may be a need for more enforcement officers at some point or more staff on the second floor for those to carry out. But just in general, the cost for litigation would probably be the same.
Would the speed be quicker? Of course, that might be a question for Judge Lively.
In theory, the idea is that filing in a municipal court would give us a quicker thing, but that could impact the rest of the docket, right? We might see a backlog, and Judge Lively can talk to that, a backlog of our other cases. But in theory, the idea is that we would be able to move the cases quicker. And I'll just turn it over to Judge Lively for his comments.
By law, in a court that handles criminal and civil cases, criminal cases take priority. So that's one thing. And Councilmember Getz, you pointed out something that was kind of important. Back when you were practicing, back when I was also in the civil courts, the civil district courts were extremely busy. They are not anymore, which is why you see the civil district courts handling family law cases and criminal cases. So the notion that they're too busy to handle these cases is not true. They have the ability to handle those cases. If you look at the comparison court that you were using, which was Galveston, and look at the backlog of their civil cases, they're not moving through very fast at all either. There's 250,000 civil cases over the last year sitting on their backlog in their municipal court. So it's not it's not a cure-all. And if you look at what you're trying to do with downtown, there's been no civil case, there's been no code cases filed in downtown over the last 15 years. It's all been outside. And Chris, we've been doing this stuff for years together. And I think it's all been outside of this. So there's been no action on downtown. It's not that we haven't been doing anything on it to do it. It's just there's no cases because it's a different animal down here. So if you started doing the building code cases, like we've done on the homes, when people would buy these homes to rehabilitate them, and then building code would go out and do inspections, and that would speed them along to get the houses up to code. We did that, and we handled those cases, but that hasn't been done downtown. To answer the other part of it, when you change your municipal court to municipal court of record, you've taken it from people's court to a whole different level of court because you've taken out the casual nature of it. And like Sheree said, there's not a whole lot of cases get appealed. The CDL cases, typically the way they get appealed is through a leapfrog. And that is just simply where the attorney files a notice of appeal, files the appeal bond, and takes to county court. If you go to a court of record, those cases now have to be tried. Every one of them has to be tried for them to appeal it. And then they have to appeal. Any appeal that goes through now of a case has to be done where they post a written request for a new trial as opposed to the verbal, I want a new trial. Now they have to post a points of error, just like you would in a court where you're represented by an attorney. Same thing as you post an appellate brief whenever you go to appeal it. It's not just I get a new trial at county court, I get another bite at the apple. It's I have to post an appellate brief. That is just the same appellate brief Mr. Getz would post, Mr. Samuel would post whenever he's briefing appellate cases for his clients. So you've taken a whole different angle to the cases that are being handled by the defendants in this court. So you just changed the nature of the court drastically for very little gain. And I don't think you're going to see the expediting the way you think you're going to see it. You still got the same number of people in court handling the cases. You're adding a whole different volume of cases without ever understanding what our underlying volume already is. We never got to talk about this until the first date it was set to be voted on. The court didn't have a voice in it. And I thank you for the workshop to where we can have a voice in it. And I enjoyed sitting down with our city attorney, our city managers, and having a chance to spitball this and come up with some options. And some of the options were, now that we're caught up from COVID, and I think this was one of the main ones we talked about, was taking an afternoon docket.
Don't spoil it, Judge.
Oh, you still got that?
Yeah, I still got it.
You still got that? Okay, I'm gonna leave that surprise alone. There's a ringer still left in here, and I'm not gonna throw that one out there because Miss City Attorney has that one, so I won't throw that out there. But there's a good solution out there to still move these cases from us quickly, get them up to county or district court, and process them through. We can hit them faster.
So I have a question, and
I'm not going to throw the answer out if it's hers.
no, it's not directed to you, Judge. It's, I guess, directed to Mr. Boone. This whole workshop and this whole discussion was precipitated by council concern of the condition of many downtown buildings. We literally have downtown buildings where glass is falling from the upper stories, posing a hazard to anybody that's walking down on the sidewalk. So much so that we, as a city, have had to cordon off some of these sidewalks with barricades. Many of these buildings have no electricity at all, much less burglar alarms or cameras, so they become targets for vandalism, and we've seen rampant vandalism. They also become enclaves for the homeless to take refuge in. Some of these buildings are really disasters. So my question is, why in the last 15 years have we not brought any code violations against any of these building owners?
So in fairness, and I believe that, ACM Boone could definitely hold his own, but in fairness, previous administration's focus has not been on downtown. And that's the direction and focus has not been on downtown, and as specifically and as hard as it has been just here lately in the last maybe 2 or 3 years. There's been a shift and a focus and a desire to improve downtown, but that hasn't always been the narrative for existing administration. But that doesn't mean that we can't do those things. Tina, can you go to the next slide? Our existing ordinances are more than sufficient to handle the issues that you expressed and to address the concerns that you outlined in your comments. We have the current staff, and they're trained, and they're very knowledgeable of the code, and it does take several departments, fire, code enforcement, building codes, to effectuate that. They are aware of that, and they are prepared to do those things, and they have the support of administration to do those things. The backlog is that there's little to no financial impact to start using our existing ordinances. We can do that in conjunction with adding a vacant building registry, which regardless if we chose to go to a municipal court of record or maintain the municipal court in and of itself, would help us identify those property owners or owners quicker in order to get them into court. A lot of the time is spent making sure we properly serve the right people, making sure that notice is adequate.
Okay, so let's suppose we use our existing ordinances and we identify quickly who owns the building and get them into court. As I understand it, we have a cap of $500 on some of these violations. That's probably not going to move the needle very much.
So it's not necessarily on some of the buildings, specifically the one that you determined that was, falling. Some of those you can bypass our municipal court process and file it straight in, a civil proceeding on the fact that there's an emergency need to protect the public, right? And there's seeking an injunction to do some emergency type action. That's something we can do, and that's something that, obviously the action would have to be brought either by the building code official or the health code, depending on the nature of the code that was being brought. But we've brought emergency actions before. We've been successful with enforcement under our previous ordinances. And I believe that ACM Boone previously proposed the vacant building registry as an enhancement to the existing ordinance as a way to kind of facilitate the need to get it going, to hold these building owners to a higher standard, making sure that when they register their building, that they board it and that it's meeting those needs, and then impose different procedures to make sure they follow that. That was just one example of how we could use our existing ordinances.
There's still also the International Property Maintenance Code that
Correct.
can be used, which may end up, we've been using that before with other buildings. And it is a laundry list of things that need to be taken care of, because some of these buildings, although the glass may be falling out, they're still structurally sound. And the purpose of the International Property Maintenance Code, and it's the International Building Code, there's a couple of them that are used.
Yeah, our planning manager is
IBC
here
and
that can kind of
IPMC.
jump into that. If you have additional questions, she's here to kind of answer that. Demi Ingman, our planning manager, she's familiar with those codes, can do those things.
Yeah, those are used, push the building owners to start getting their buildings up to code for safety reasons. So and it's not that little bitty things, it's major things that start getting the clock ticking, get things done. So there's a bigger push than what you see on the standard, like a litter ordinance or a weed ordinance.
And to that effect, one of the, I guess, concerns from council was that the process in municipal court was too slow. So one of the things that we did discuss in one of our internal meetings was creating a specific docket day to handle property maintenance issues. And that would allow for, not necessarily priority, but they would be on their own docket day and they would get placed quicker and heard by the court faster. That would satisfy our need to get it through the court before we followed, if it was like not a major or emergency action, to get it to the district courts or county courts quicker.
Councilman Samuel.
I have two questions. One is, by going to a court of record, how does that impact, as you say, the people's court? This prevents the people. Tell me the impact that it would have.
So as Judge Lively mentioned, it would no longer be as an informal proceeding. It would be more of a, and I hate to say traditional court because municipal court is real court, but a more formal setting where they would need to file written motions and adhere to certain filing deadlines and procedures, just like in a normal.
So in many ways, the average person would not have the ability to go in and represent themselves in addressing issues without having some knowledge of.
Yes.
Hold it, please. Without some knowledge of the process.
So it would require that we educate or spend some time educating the public on how to do that. So without an educational process, it would be burdensome or could be difficult for a layperson without that knowledge. So some courts that have converted have, launched an, more interactive website for people who kind of want to go on. They have, the forms or template forms available for people to kind of, fill out, for them. And
so
the clerks, without giving legal advice, can, tell people, you need to fill out this form and you need to return it here, so on and so forth, just similar to what they would do at the courthouse.
And there would be then a formal process for appealing to the district court, to the.
Yes, sir. Just like Judge Lively mentioned, you would have to file a brief as opposed to just.
Which would not be a form. That would be something you would have to do.
Which could not be a form, yes.
But as of now, a person could appeal a decision made in municipal court and they would not have to prepare a brief.
It's simply a retrial at county court.
It's retrying the case. So that tells me this would take away the people's court. Whereas, and I understand, I'm not going to get caught up on semantics, but the average person could not go into the courtroom and defend themselves without having some type of assistance from somewhere.
The people that typically come in need a little help. The ones that can take care of it through mail or by the window don't need that help.
Okay, and my second question is, what is the benefit to the people by having us going to a court of record as opposed to the way it is now?
So the benefit was not really for the general public. The benefit was to advance the council's idea that we wanted to have a more efficient way to get cases, the civil cases heard. So the balance was that obviously that it would change the dynamics of the court and that we would, manage that with education and a campaign to educate the citizens that would be, visiting the court. But the overall benefit would be that the city would have the intended benefit of being able to process code cases for property maintenance, specifically in downtown, faster.
So we're talking about creating a more efficient way of addressing the issues downtown, but there are other alternatives. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. That's how I started the presentation with that understanding that would this work for before we even got into this conversation, the conversation started with, would this work for Beaumont? And it depends on two factors. What is the council's primary goals and how much do the council want to invest into reaching those goals?
Okay.
So that's how we started the conversation. So you're absolutely right. It's a balancing between those two things.
So by not having a court of record, we can still move forward with addressing those concerns that would create opportunities for development downtown without taking away the people's
which is exactly what we're talking about now. If I can go to the next slide.
I just want to make sure I understand.
One last thing before the next slide. There's one more dynamic change under the statute when you convert to municipal court of record. That is that the court administrator and the court clerks work under the judge. That would change the dynamics of the way they exist now. That was just to put another wrench in the monkey.
I need to catch you.
Don't run off yet. Till we get, in case you.
Oh, she's
Close.
got the ringer there for you. So.
The next option would be to, and you could do this in conjunction with our existing ordinance, would be to add an overlay district, and our planning manager, Deming Ingman, is here to kind of present to council what that would look like for us. And just for a side, as she's coming, an overlay district is just a district layered on top of another district that allows for additional regulations in that covered area. So, Demi.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. To expand on the overlay concept, typically overlays allow a streamlined and focused implementation of specific regulations intended to meet the community's goals and policies for a particular area of a municipality. Essentially, overlays are a tool that allow a city to implement rules that complement established zoning districts without applying said rules citywide. Additionally, it would allow the city to add protection of cultural resources within downtown by encouraging maintenance of structures that are located within the overlay district. It should be noted that great care must be taken in drafting the provisions of the overlay so as to avoid hindering development, delaying essential projects, or limiting districts' ability to respond to ever-changing needs of our community. That said, overlay districts can be adapted to changing circumstances without implicating the rules of the underlying zone itself by way of ordinance amendments. The city does have a few overlays currently in place, such as floodplain management, Oaks Historic District, as well as signage and design overlays. If council chooses to pursue an overlay district for downtown, planning staff looks forward to working towards and assisting in those efforts. Thank you, guys.
Yes, Councilman Felshaw first, and then Councilman Getz.
I had a question too.
And then Councilman Turner.
Judge, you said something earlier that caused me to pause, and perhaps I misunderstood, but just seeking clarity. Are you in favor of moving to a court of records or not?
The answer is no.
That would be a firm no.
Okay, that's all I needed. You said something, it caught my attention. I thought, wait a minute. I was assuming you were here to advocate for this because we were going to move your court forward progressively and, get more of a digital world, but you're saying no. Okay.
And also to clarify, I want to apologize to Mr. Boone because it has been, as Ms. Sheree said, over the last 15 years, there's been no focus on downtown from an administrative view, not want of code enforcement to do that. It was just never a push there.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Getz, then Councilman Turner.
So we have done a lot downtown is what I've always been told. We've put in the event center, we've put in the Lakeside Center, and we put in the skate park. And, so there are these things that are being done. Riverfront Park is, of course, being redeveloped. My concern is in the central business district. And there has been a lack of administrative enforcement to make sure that those buildings are kept up to code. Now, this overlay district idea intrigues me because one of the things that I firmly believe is important is that every building owner downtown should be required to make sure there's utilities that work within those buildings. That's how I feel about it, and probably burglar alarms and cameras too, because we have got to do something to stem the vandalism and destruction and homeless that are going into these buildings and destroying them. If we were to adopt an overlay district, could we put in requirements like that?
Yes, there's certain stipulations that where it could be a little bit more restrictive or stricter enforcement that you could impose on those on the buildings that lie within that overlay district. Of course, it would need to be drafted in such a way where it doesn't hinder development, and we're actually trying to improve our development and the facade of the buildings downtown, including the inside. But there are certain we could, yes.
Would we have any constitutional concerns? Would there be any issues with downtown building owners saying, wait, you're making us do something that the general people that, out there in other parts of the city don't have to do?
So we looked at what other overlay districts looked like in other parts of the cities compared to ours, and none of them really had any requirement that they have camera systems, but all of them had restrictions as it relates to making sure that the building had utilities, making sure that the building was properly secure if it was not occupied, and then conditions for when they started to renovate, making sure aesthetically it aligned with the district. And I think we kind of discussed that as well. So the requirement for a alarm might be a stretch, but not utilities. That seemed to be a consistent norm, was that you either have utilities in any building or had it registered.
Yeah, have you seen any cases that ruled against a city that did require burglar alarms or cameras?
We didn't see any districts that had that requirement. So we can go back and look to see if anybody had that requirement, if it was challenged. I think we specifically looked at what we can do in terms of just general enforcement. So typically the rule is if you're going to impose something, there has to be a compelling governmental interest to do so. And so, we could probably, just because of our dynamics of our downtown, it may be, different and unique from any other cities that we looked at that might not have those issues. And so we could probably go back and determine whether or not it would rise to the level of a compelling governmental interest and see how far that stretches.
Thank you.
Councilman Turner, then Councilman Neal.
My concern, and just something I need to know for clarity with overlay districts, once we establish what we want and how we want it, can we go back and make additional changes or transitions if need be? Because, over time, things change. We might start it off one way and see we need to make some tweaks to make sure it's more efficient. Is that possible?
Yeah, we could always come back with an ordinance amendment addressing that overlay district. Also, if there's a certain, there's always an appeals process. So if there's a certain development regulation that doesn't necessarily apply to that developer or what they're trying to do at that building, they can always go through the process. And what that looks like, a lot of ours go through the Board of Adjustment. So it could be with that ordinance, we could specify which board that they need to go through. That would be appropriate.
Yeah. So I guess to backdate, the creation of our overlay district would become in the form of an ordinance. And so council would obviously establish the criteria, regulations, and restrictions that you want to see in that area. And then you would also define the borders or the covered area that you want to do. So you would have the ability to expand that area, restrict that area, and then amend that area as you see fit. And obviously, as Ms. Ingman mentioned, we could draft it in a way that still allowed for discretion amongst council so that we wouldn't hinder development with any process. That
was my concern right there.
Yeah, with any process, there'll be an appeals process, so that developer could go to the Board of Adjustment to seek relief. And then obviously, if that didn't work, then there would be an appeals process from that as well. But again, council could have final authority in terms of how they wanted to enforce that. If they felt like, hey, we need to pull back that issue, requiring a specific brick color is too much, and we want to adjust that, you could do that.
And Mayor, my follow-up is pretty much a statement. When I first got on council, probably about 2 years ago, I used to always try to figure out how this thing functioned, and it was more so if the staff kind of led the council and the council didn't lead the staff. And I just want to kind of compliment you, Mr. Williams, and Sheree. Like, it's a whole different culture shock since I've been on here this second go around, because ideally the people lead the council and the council leads the staff with you, Mr. Williams, with direction. And I'm starting to see that more and more with you guys weighing in on how we want things done. And we're not having the mentality of, oh, we don't want to do it this way. We're coming back saying, okay, well, how about we do it this way, and making some deviations. And I appreciate that. It was a struggle when I first got on because that was not the culture. And now I'm starting to see the culture change. And I just want to compliment you guys on that. That really matters when it comes to making the city move forward and grow. And I think, it was a little backwards when I first got on, but I truly see the difference now.
I'll conclude the presentation and turn it over to you, Mayor, for discussion. But I did want to take the time to publicly thank the individuals who worked on this project with us. Chase Ingman in my office, our Chief Technology Officer, Angela Wright, and Jamie Nelson from Information Technology, the Planning Manager, Dean Ingman from Planning and Community Development, Judge Lively, and our Municipal Court Administrator, Bree Thibodeau, really helped to kind of formulate what it would look like and gave us a really good view of what the conversion would look like, but also some alternatives in what we can present to council today. So it was definitely a group effort, just the mouthpiece. In taking the totality of the situation, again, when we initially presented it, it was just to present it from the idea of to reach council's objective of having a more invited and attractive downtown and how we could address that primary concern of not just having a fine situation, but getting the cases through quicker. After having conversations with Judge Lively and our municipal court coordinator, the impact of what that looks like for municipal court and our, the fallout from that from future defendants and citizens that engage in business in our court, led staff to believe that it really wasn't probably the best idea for them. However, if the idea and the goal is still for council to fast track it, the municipal court of record is an option. So it's a matter of, we can do all the things we talked about today. We can do a combination of 2 or 3 or all 3. But it's really what we want to take away from this is direction of what council prioritized in this particular manner and how you want to see us move forward with effectuating that desire to have a more attractive downtown, or as Councilman Getz put it earlier, just seeing more focalized enforcement in downtown.
All right, Councilman Neal, then Councilman Samuel.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Boone, does the IFC or IBC have a section on vacant buildings?
The IPMC does, International Property Maintenance Code.
And we've adopted that.
Yes, sir.
So does it talk about power and life safety and everything else?
Yes, sir.
So instead of creating another district or another ordinance, why are we not just simply enforcing the ones that we already have in place?
Well, so the IPMC, it speaks to code violations if a building is occupied. And that's kind of the rub here is we have a lot of big buildings that aren't occupied, that aren't active, many of which are not necessarily in danger of falling down structurally. Some may be, some may not. But that's where the IPMC comes in is, if you have a broken window, obviously that's can be addressed. It's in the IPMC. If you have an open and accessible door, that can be addressed. If the facade is falling off, that can be addressed. But in order to say, look, you need to take an affirmative action to add power to your building or sprinkler system to your building, et cetera, then that's not mandated by the IPMC.
So the challenge now in most of these buildings that are dilapidated downtown now, to go back and get power back to these buildings, you're talking literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in some of these buildings because none of them are up to code. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, First Baptist Church, for example, 900 Calder. That building is in such bad shape now that to get a new service put in there to where Energy and the city of Beaumont would sign off to get power on that building would be a big deal. And creating a new ordinance or law to where you're going to fine the building owner to the point that they're gonna do something, I just don't see it. I mean, the guys don't have the money to take care of the buildings they have down here now. Some of them do, some of them don't. So unless we're really gonna pass an ordinance and really put some teeth into it to do it, I think it's, I don't know. Something's gotta be done. But.
Mayor.
Councilman Samuel first, and then Councilman Getz.
Well, I'm of the opinion, we have the ability to make a difference downtown right now. It's going to have to be this council takes push for the change and the change of the culture and how we approach it. We have the ability, we don't really have to do an overlay district. Well, there may be some basis to doing overlays as we move through this process, but that would satisfy. But I'm totally against taking away the people's court or changing the people's court. I think that would have an adverse impact on those who cannot or don't have the ability to learn or hire someone to assist them through that process. So I think if we are simply concerned about expediting the growth of downtown and repairing downtown, we have the ability to do that. We just have to be focused and begin to push for that. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Getz.
So we just heard Mr. Boone say that the IPMC doesn't really apply to vacant buildings, and we can't do anything without an overlay district to require building owners to hook up their utilities. And we heard Mr. Neal say that that's going to be expensive. Well, yeah, it might be. But if we just keep doing what we've been doing, you're going to keep getting the same results. And some of these building owners seem to be content to just hang on to these buildings forever without making any improvements. If we don't do something to insist that these buildings be secured and have some standard of utility requirements and burglar alarms, we cannot park police officers in the lobby of every building to prevent vagrants and vandalism. We just can't do it. I think some of these building owners would like to see us do that, but that's not practical. What we need to do is we need to have help from the building owners to secure their buildings, and if they don't want to do it, then we need to have the tools to compel them to do it. And that, I see, is possibly done through an overlay district. And I agree with Councilman Samuel on not changing it to a court of record for the reasons that he stated as well.
Mr. Boone.
Mayor, real quickly, just one clarification. IPMC does apply to vacant buildings just when I talk about the exterior. So whether or not they're secure, enclosed, and as I mentioned, facade falling off. And again, I think to Councilman Neal's point, probably the question before us now is whether through an overlay or whatever mechanism, do you want staff to insist that those buildings are brought up to code completely? So that may be hundreds of thousands of dollars, et cetera. But when we talk about plumbing, electrical, HVAC, et cetera, or at least a minimum standard of security system, camera, if that's, and again, we had a work session back in May, as the city attorney mentioned, and I think as mentioned in the strategic plan, that is a priority of council. And so if that's the direction you want us to go, then.
Well, I'm going to say this. If y'all are really serious about wanting to do a river walk, you've got to, start with what we already have. I mean, we've got an urban downtown with a business district that I would feel a lot comfortable about talking about some of these other pretty ambitious ideas if I could see the buildings that we have right now being maintained and improved. I don't see that, and I think you have to have that before you can take any other step.
I agree with Councilmember Getz.
one of the things we could do in that regard, if that's what council wanted to do, is to kind of have it bring up to code. The recommendation from my office would be that you send out proper notices and that you allow those owners to, have a time to do that. Like, you have so much time to start pulling permits, and you have so much time to start bringing it up to code before full-on enforcement occurs, right? So obviously, as Councilman Neal mentioned, we're talking about an extreme outpouring of cash and capital that some of the business owners may not have, and some business owners might own multiple buildings that need quite a bit of attention. So that would be something that would, again, allow for proper notice. And I'm sure most of the lawyers on here understand what I'm saying. Proper notice to be given to those property owners before full enforcement would take place.
And property owners can always put them on the market.
All right, we got Councilman Philshaw, Councilman Durio, and Councilman Getz.
Well, and again, we're going over the same thing, but I will say I support this. The fact is, if we start enforcing this code, it will cause people in the past that were purchasing buildings and then just letting them sit there, it would cause them to pause before they went to purchase that building if they knew they were going to have to bring it up to code. If they knew that, I'm going to have to bring this up to code, so before I buy this building, I have to consider that, and that means they're going to have to come up with a plan of what they're going to do with that building. But right now, they've been buying the buildings and just letting them sit there and decay, doing nothing. So I would support enforcing this code.
Councilman Durio.
I agree with that, because we hold homeowners accountable for the red tag houses. I mean, I don't see what's the difference, but also what will be the, what will be the penalty for non-compliance once we get that far? Once we send out the proper notices, give them a proper amount of time, and they still decide not to do anything, what then?
I see.
So that would be, again, once we sent out adequate and proper notice and gave plenty of time to kind of enforcement starts. So you would have in the letter, it would be very firm, we anticipate you pulling permits. And so that's another thing, like pulling permits is important too. As Councilman Sam, you mentioned people buying buildings and just kind of holding them. There would be a requirement if the building, when they come forward to put forward what they wanted to do with that building at planning and zoning or at BOA, one of the conditions would be that these things be done within a certain period of time. You would start seeing those things different. So when those items came before you at council, you would hear that, like, are you able to do these things? Are you able to, get utilities on, get the HVAC thing? There'd be a higher responsibility imposed on the purchaser of a building. Sellers, you might see some sales go downtown because people might be trying to unload those buildings, but then there'd be a higher burden on that purchaser of the property to be able to meet those requirements, because it's not going to transfer. Once those notices go out, that buyer buys that property, we want to see you pulling permits to get this building up to code. So it would be drafted, and we would work with them our office would work with them to draft it in a way that we wouldn't see a bunch of monopoly purchases where people just kind of selling it to one another to avoid having to do the work.
Okay. But what I'm saying is, if the buyer or the owner, they go through the whole process and they still don't do anything.
That's enforcement. That's what I'm saying. Like that's what I'm talking about. But putting that language in. So when you saw the items that came before you today about meeting those codes, complying with those building codes, that's when you start doing work. You have to keep those things in mind. What you would see now is a timeline, because again, we've given notice, right? So you're buying what we considered a substandard structure that requires some attention. And so in addition to all those other items that we normally list, complying with building and fire codes, you would see within 30 days or within 45 days, pull permits to do the following work. And so you would start seeing that most likely if we went that route in some of those agreements for downtown development.
But the response is fine only, right?
So it's fine only as it relates to those enforcements. However, we can appeal, like with anything else, we can take it up to district court when we're not getting the relief. You can take it up to district court or county court to get more enforcement.
But I think that going to his question, the
okay.
fine would be $500.
Yeah, for the most part, like
and then it would continue to multiply from there.
Yes, sir. Most of the ordinances allow for a fine that's committed per day. And Councilman Dury, you might be aware from this from the fire department. You commit an offense every day that it's in violation. So you'd be able to file it every single day. So that it's not in compliance. So that $500 fine racks up. The code only allows for like those higher fines as it relates to public safety in like health, in the health code. So the property code is kind of limited to that. So obviously they can impose a maximum fine and they can file a charge every day that it's not in compliance.
But some of the, like they said with the windows falling out, that's public safety.
Right. City Manager Williams, and then we'll get to every council person.
Thank you, Mayor. I put this item on the agenda some months ago to find out. I wanted to know the philosophy of this council on downtown and dealing with the buildings, dilapidated buildings. We had that discussion. I think it might have been during one of our budget workshops. I could be incorrect, but I think this is when we had it. And there was a clear direction from this council that you had a philosophy, you wanted to deal with the dilapidated buildings and situation downtown. And after that, because I wanted that direction, I don't want staff going out enforcing something that this council will not politically support. It doesn't do them any good that they're out there, and then when your phone rings, they're backing up on whatever they do. So once again, today, it seems really clear that that's what you want to do. But it's going to take a collaborative effort. That's why we start with this council. It's going to take a collaborative effort to have an impactful, effective downtown building enforcement program. You know, we can go out there and write citations, do that every day. But it's going to take some penalties. We're talking about enforcement. You just mentioned penalties. And that's got to come from the court. You know, and I think that's where Sheree was headed today. I'm sorry, I have a daughter named Sheree. Was headed today. You know, what it's going to look like with penalties. We can write these, and it's going to take a collaborative effort of this court here, staff, doing code enforcement, but we're going to need to, you're going to have to impose on the court the importance of this project to the court. You know, I can't speak for the judge, for sure, but unless they're not putting penalties that's going to be impactful to these property owners, it's not going to work. You got to have an impactful, collaborative effort for this to work, whether it's from the laws, from the ordinances, to the enforcement, to the penalties, all the way through. And until we get that, it's not going to work. You know, because if the fine is not high enough, some people rather pay the fine. And that fine's not automatically $500. That's the judge's decision, what that fine's going to be. It's yeah, maximum, but it could be 25. You know,
but it could be $500 every time they're not in.
Absolutely, but that's the court's got to know that's important to you. It's that important to you. And again, I can't answer for the judge by any means, but until all of those things work cohesively, you will not have an effective downtown enforcement program.
I have a question about that. So if, well, no, I'm not going to even ask.
All right, we're going to just go around this way. Councilman Getz, Councilman Turner, Councilman Philshaw.
Well, so I certainly agree with what you say, Mr. Williams, because as Mr. Neal said, it could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to bring a building up to code. It might be more economically efficient for the building owner to just pay $500, you know, for an extended period of time. Of course, we all know what happens to a residential home that doesn't meet code. When we have people come up, they get on a plan, and if they don't have their timetable met, that house gets put on a demolition list. Could we, I mean, I guess that's the ultimate hammer, is that if you don't do what you need to do to your building to make it habitable and up to code, it's going to get torn down. Now, I'd hate to see some of these, you know, historic buildings get torn down, but I guess that is the ultimate resolution and the ultimate hammer, is it not?
Just one thing on that. It gets really expensive to tear one of those buildings down. Really, really expensive.
Well, we know that from the AT&T building, right?
For sure. And then too, you have to be careful not to end up with a lot of parking lots downtown. So you might take a little more effort, council member.
To piggyback
more
on the
thought than
manager's comments, obviously that expense, when we tear down a residential structure, we absorb that cost. When we tear down a commercial structure, we put a lien on the building. And that could hinder development in downtown, someone having to come in and pay out that demo lien. So what would happen is they would come before council and ask that the lien be forgiven in exchange for them developing downtown. So we would start eating a lot of that demolition costs. And as you know, that those, depending on where the building is structured, if the building has asbestos, as Keith and talked about, we would be responsible for ensuring all that cost. Some of the buildings downtown, unfortunately, are very closely connected. We'd be responsible for making sure that that demolition didn't disrupt business, which in most cases could sometimes be impossible. So you do have people who are moved, who are operating downtown, trucks, Astellas, they're located near buildings that are probably not in the best of shape. And if we had to demo those buildings, what would be the impact to those businesses? How would they do it? The city would, have to be cognitive of those responsibilities.
I understand that, Ms. Reed, and I appreciate all of that, but you have to weigh the cost of just letting a building sit and maintaining that status quo. And again, I've been a part of Main Street and historical preservation for a long, long time. I don't want to see these buildings torn down, but at some point, you're going to have to weigh whether or not that is the path that we have to take in order to clear it out for something new to come up.
Don't disagree.
Mike, I think there's two things here. One is there's a difference between a house being red tagged because there are structural problems and it's going to be raised or repaired. Many of the buildings downtown may be, I would say they're structurally sound, but they are not actually what you call it?
Open and accessible. Open and accessible.
Open and accessible. So we're dealing with two things. We're dealing with demolition if it's structurally unsound, but we're dealing with fines.
Okay.
That's a punishment. And again, I will say, if we say this is what we want done, the court has to follow suit.
Right. Councilman Turner?
One of my concerns is, we're having this discussion, and right now, I agree, it sounds great, but when some of these building owners start calling some of us and putting pressure on us to talk to staff, are we gonna stand firm? I'm okay with it, but I wanna set up front right now because what's gonna happen is, something to get slowed down and we'll ask why. And then two council members then went behind to the city manager and now everything's slowed down. What I'm saying up front, if we're gonna do this, let's not play that game. If we're gonna do this, let's all be on the same page and let's not go behind and go try to talk to Kendra or any staff about slowing anything down. We need to all be on the same page. So I think the best thing to do is, instead of being quiet, we need to know where everybody stands prior to moving forward on this, because we're going to waste time. And I'm tired of wasting time. We've done it long enough.
Mm-hmm. I've said where I stand.
I know, but it's a few of us. I want all of us.
All right. Thank you, Councilman. And I think I know where you stand. Councilman Felshaw.
I yield my time to my colleagues to my left.
You know where I stand.
Councilman Neal.
I'm not against enforcing the ordinances that we have in place. I just know that, I said it's going to be expensive for some building owners.
It ain't going to be pretty.
No, it's. One other comment. You talk about tearing down some of these buildings. I think that some of these buildings, the demo cost is a lot larger than the land value. So there is no ROI on tearing some of these buildings down. So just know that going into it too.
With ROI.
All right. I think we know if we, at this point, let's just wrap up with how you feel on this, I think.
I just have a question.
Otherwise, we're going to have to take a recess.
I feel like the rest of us, We need to get this enforced. But if we go the whole route with the fines and writing tickets or whatever, and we get no cooperation from the property owner, then can we go to civil route, take them to court
So,
to
yes,
sue?
sir, that's always the end goal. If we can't if we're not getting redress from the fine, if the fine isn't compelling, that we would seek civil remedies, which would be an injunction or to compel them to follow the ordinance. So that's always a process. So that wouldn't change regardless of what route we took. We wouldn't change that.
I'm for enforcing what we have and enforcing it to the fullest. I'm with you, Councilman. Well, everybody is with Councilman Turner, me too.
All right. And to be on record, I believe that we ought to enforce our ordinances. So it's not whether it's just building ordinances or not. If we have ordinances, we should enforce them. And if we're not going to enforce them, we don't need to have them.
Make sure they
Because
have
it
teeth.
sends wrong message.
So before we close, there was a conversation about the creation of an overlay district. Are we just solely saying we want to, and enhancing our additional ordinance, are we solely focusing on what we have with no additions? Or would y'all, is it the desire of council for staff to come back with some creativity to that?
I think at some point, we're going to have to begin enforcing. And I think we can always come back if we need to, and we're having trouble following it. But at this point, in terms of kicking the ball down the road further before we start enforcing.
I was asking, like, in terms of enforcement, what is it the idea that obviously we would start with what we have, but to enhance enforcement with some additional things that we discussed today?
I would say focus on enforcement. And if we find a need for overlay district, then we can deal with that if we reach a point that the enforcement is not effective.
There was also the issue of a vacant building registry. Is that concept?
Yeah.
Because again, that would require an amendment to our ordinance as well.
Okay, well, I do believe the registry is essential because that gives a record of what's been done, what's been asked to be done, and what has not been done. So I think that would be important to the existing ordinance.
Yeah, Mayor, if I may.
All right, Councilman Getz, then Councilman Turner.
Or
Councilman Turner, then Councilman Getz.
I agree with the registry 100%, but I do know what's going to eventually happen is you will have to strengthen up things. Well, what we just have on the books, I think it would be wise to start working on overlay options because at least we can be discussing it prior to it coming in fruition. I'm more than confident it'll get to that point where we'll have to go that route. So I'd rather start discussing it now and listen to some of staff's creative ideas versus waiting for it to get there. Because I know we'll run into some barriers.
So I think we could probably start pretty quickly with the building registry. That's not a big thing, but we can also start looking at some drafts for the overlay district and kind of circle back to that. But yeah,
And that's what I wanted to hear too, because, when you talk about enforcement, what exactly are we going to be enforcing? Obviously, if there's a public health hazard like windows falling down on people's heads, that is something that we could enforce right now. But things like adding a requirement that building owners put electricity in and working utilities, that's going to require going further than what we can do right now. That would require us going to an overlay district and putting those requirements as part of that, if I understand you right. Is that correct, Mr. Boone?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
that's what I have. Thank you. That's what I needed.
thank you. All right, so now we're going to have council member comments. Councilman Neal.
I just want to make sure the record reflects that Odwin Samuel and Mike Getz agreed.
Councilman Samuel.
I have
Councilman Neal.
nothing more.
Councilman Felshaw.
I just want to acknowledge the fact that the Tennis Association honored Allison Getz with the Life Achievement Award, and congratulations to the Getz family. And also acknowledge the fact that the Getz family did the endowment in her honor. And so, again, well done. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Turner.
Of course, Mike, congrats to you and your family, man. Much respect for what y'all do in the community and what you continue to do. I wanted to point out, we recently had a murder in the North End, and some guys in the neighborhood in the North End put on an event last weekend called Guns Down, Hands Up. They had over 400 people in a gym in the heart of the North End, and guys who had beef or issues with each other, they matched them up and they fought on the gloves versus how it's normally handled in the streets. And the two guys that headed that event was Ricardo Washington and Quentin Thomas. You know, some guys who had a little trouble back in the day, but, you know, they turned it around, and instead of complaining about what's going on in the community, they really did something about it. And the gym was packed. Like, you couldn't even move in there, and it was at Solid Rock Church. So, I mean, when we talk about things for young people to do and ways to combat things that's going wrong in this community, these gentlemen did it with no help. So when they do another one, if we can maybe just go by and support them or see what we can do to help them out, I'll make sure I get the word out to everybody so we can see if we can go by there, all right? So I appreciate if we did that. And can the council, can we get an update on the youth basketball league? I know me, the mayor, Chris, sat down with our city manager, Mr. Williams, but I just want the whole entire council to be abreast on, you know, shortfalls, what went wrong, and what are we gonna do to see that through and make it go right. And the last thing, I want to really compliment staff on using economic development tools to see potential growth downtown. The CA Empowerment Zone come to fruition today, and we talked about it, even though it hasn't happened, just to see us using some of these tools, Chris, I want to say I appreciate y'all. Like, we have it in our arsenal. It's good that we're actually using it and attempting to get some traction. So thank you again. And I want to reiterate that my experience now versus what it was when I first got on the council, it really feels good that the staff is working with the council's direction and the direction we want to go in versus my experience when I first got here. We can't do it that way. We're not going to do it. That's not going to work. You guys always come back with an alternative, and I really appreciate that. I think that's the mentality that make this city become winners. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Turner. Councilman Getz.
No comment.
Councilman Durio.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, someone spoke earlier. We do have neighborhood association meetings, and we bring out members of staff to speak. This coming Thursday, we'll have the postmaster at the Pear Orchard Neighborhood Association meeting. So we bring folks from staff to speak and answer questions for the citizens. And this happens on a weekly basis. And also, folks have to realize, in the city of Beaumont right now, somewhere they're working on infrastructure. That's every day, all day. We can't wait until we replace every pipe in Beaumont before we start doing these quality of life projects like the food truck park, because we'll never get to it, because we never, ever stop working on streets. I can tell you, nobody's up here for the money. Nobody's up here for the title. We're up here because, one thing I agree, we're up here because we love Beaumont. We love Beaumont. That's why we're sitting up here, because we want to do a good job. And we want to be able to do that without feeling threatened or attacked or anything like that. And that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Durio. Councilman Samuel.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I did forget to I'm happy that you had the meeting. One more would have been illegal. So I want you to know that, yes, that was a time you could go, any part of town would know where you can go and play basketball. Any part of town knew they could put the
Endowment in the name of Allison Getz. It was a beautiful article, and I think a wonderful tribute to her. So congratulations to you.
Same here. Congratulations, Mike.
Nothing, thank you.
Mayor and Council, I would like to introduce to you our new Facilities Maintenance Director. If you could stand, his name is Mr. John Bell. He will be replacing the great Keith Folsom, who's retiring at the end of next month. So Mr. Bell brings to us a wealth of knowledge in facilities and expertise as well, technical expertise in facilities and building maintenance. He spent many years at TxDOT and the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles. He started yesterday, and he'll shadow Mr. Folsom for the next month until Mr. Folsom leaves. So we're glad to have him on board. Thank you.
And normally our meetings are this long.
No comment.
Just want to congratulate you, Councilmember Getz, on the endowment, and the article in the paper was amazing. I enjoyed reading that, so congratulations.
Mr. City Manager.
Okay, I was gonna do Keith Folsom, I knew guy, but June took care of that one, so I won't have to do that one. Also, congratulations, Mike, on your efforts and what you're doing with Allison there. I will give council a written update on the basketball youth league deal, been the meeting and the things that have happened since then, so I'll be getting that to you by the end of the week. I won't say tomorrow, but I'll get that to you by the end of the week in writing, and feel free to contact me with any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. City Manager, and I certainly want to congratulate Councilman Getz as well on the endowment, and they're very kind and a nice article. Also, I had the privilege last week to go to the Washington, D.C. for the United States Conference of Mayors, and it's a great time to collaborate and hear about some of the challenges that we talk about here every day, and the solutions that other cities have found, and to be able to collaborate with them and find out what has worked and hadn't worked. And we're talking certainly with economic development and homelessness and youth activities, infrastructure, as well. I also had the privilege of meeting with our federal and state federal representatives, both Senator Cornyn and Senator Cruz, as well as Congressman Babbitt and Congressman Weber. They all took time to meet individually, discuss these issues, how they might be able to help. And clearly, one of their best ways to be able to help is with funding. And we presented to them what we are looking to be able to do to in terms of economic development here in town, as well with our riverfront development and our hotel project, as well as certainly infrastructure and homelessness. And, you know, they can't earmark money now, evidently, is how it's referred to as, but there is always a pot of money in trying to get our fair share of it. I also got to meet with several people from the federal government that were there that sat down and also gave some direction. It was certainly I was in awe just being there and getting to be present, but also I learned a lot, and I feel like I was encouraged on the projects that we're talking about, because I received encouragement from them and the steps that we would need to do. And all of this is going to require this community to be involved in and engaged with, and we're going to continue to put that out there. That is why we have Beaumont Vision2035.com to make it easy. Yes.
No, you can
finish.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure that we covered that. We also have started, well, some citizens have, that the city is enabling or helping them, neighbors helping neighbors, through a variety of churches and organizations, and we're going to be getting more information out. Feel free to call the mayor's office if you want to be involved in that, and certainly organizations that want to give back to the community and meet some of the needs of the residents. And I also appreciate all the comments up here today. Certainly, we have a valuable tool that is underutilized right now with our neighborhood associations and our monthly meetings, because council is generally very well represented at those meetings, as well as PD and others from across the city. And it's convenient to the residences, and it is in the evening time, and they are monthly. So, and all the areas of town have at least one. So there is an opportunity to do that. And yes, Mr. City Manager.
And certainly don't want to go after the mayor, but I thank all of council for the discussion today. It's been some really good, healthy discussion, so appreciate it. Thanks, Chris, for those words. And also I'd like to thank Councilmember Turner for commending staff today. You know, Councilmember Turner doesn't hesitate either side whether he's going to say something to staff, whether they're not doing their job. So I appreciate you being man enough to say, okay, we're doing a good job. So thank you for commending staff. Thank you.
With that, the meeting is adjourned.